All right, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. So good to see so many new and some familiar faces. Welcome to our Incubator program live preview and mentor meetup. My name is Alex, and I will be guiding today's session, joined by many of the In Rhythm and Capital Institute mentors today who you're going to have the chance to get to know. We have 1 hour together, and in addition to getting to know your mentors, we're also going to be covering things like, why did we launch an incubator? Why now? Why is it important at this moment in time? We're going to be sharing a little bit about the program, a bit about the overview, and then we're going to have lots of time for Q&A. And yeah, but first to start, we'd love if you could all take a moment just to drop into the chat. Who are you? Your name, where you're calling in from. If you're representing an organization, drop the name, as well as in one word, how are you showing up today? So I'll give you all just a moment. I'll pause, give everybody a moment to just drop that in the chat. Your name, where you're from, organization, and in one word, how are you showing up today? And I'm going to stop my screen share so that everyone can see one another's faces. There's so many wonderful faces here. Awesome. Great. We have people calling in from, people are grateful, curious, lots of curiosity, excited. I'm also excited. That was going to be my word. I'm really coming into the room very excited. People from all over the world, Portugal, Canada. I'm I'm Canadian from Montreal, but based in Minnesota right now. South Africa, Boston. Wonderful. Well, it's great to hear a little bit more about you all and who's in the room, and we're looking forward to diving in together today. We're going to be hearing first from our team member, Jeff Sue, who's going to be walking us through a little bit about the program, giving an overview as well as why we launched it. So Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you if you are ready. You with us, Jeff? There you are. Hey, Jeff. Oh, you're on mute, though.
Hi, everyone. Of course, Zoom decided to update right now, as it always does. So great to see you all. Great to see some familiar faces. I'm just going to run through very briefly. All the information's available on the website and in the program guide, but I'll give a brief overview of what the incubator is. And then we're going to hear from all of the team members, some more specifics about the incubator itself and who they are, and us, who we are as mentors. So I'm going to share my screen. Great. So With Life, as you all know, is a partnership between In Rhythm and the Capital Institute. And at the heart of our partnership is the belief and recognition that we need to be designing to address the poly crisis with life in mind. And when we think of traditional incubators or traditional organizations, there's a very different model for how we tend to think of an organization. Either consciously or subconsciously, organizations are designed after a model of the idea that the organization should be built like a machine, that we should be pushing for efficiency and productivity. And in the course, we'll go into much more detail about the history of this, how it expresses itself, the consequences of this. But we just want to point this out that it's so part of our psyche in definitely in the English language, I think in other languages, that it's really built into our language. If you just Google, how do I run my business better? You immediately see images like this: gears and machines, the idea of the machine should work, your business should work like a well-oiled machine, that different departments are gears in the machine. And it's completely part of our language. How many people, show of hands, have used a term like this, either in English or in your native language? That we work like a well-oiled machine. I don't have bandwidth for that today. referring to our own time and passion and life force, equating it to ones and zeros of internet. We've got to dial that in, or we've got to move the needle talking about impact. So we actually have a little game here we play at With Life. It's sort of like the equivalent of a swear jar. Whenever we find ourselves inadvertently using a mechanistic term, we put a little bit of money into a kitty and we'll do something with it at some point, have a party. And so we believe that we can design organizations and economies and the systems that our organizations are a part of in a very different way. And in the incubator, we'll be leading you through this design process or this contrast in a very detailed way. But just to introduce it to you, we believe that when you start with a machine design, then you take that machine design, look at best practices, you look at different policies and procedures, and you engineer a set of best practices. And many different business management, organizational management will be designed around the belief that there is a best practice that you can apply to all different circumstances, all different industries. And we start from a very different premise. And so we know that if we take a best practice that might work very well for one industry, say agile technology or agile manufacturing, it doesn't always apply well to every industry that you might be part of, just as one example. And so we've seen many examples where people take a best practice and they enforce it into their unique context. And this ends up creating a set of prescriptive structures we see that is ultimately degenerating the system that we're trying to design. And in the incubator, we'll introduce a very different design approach, which is if we start with a living systems design, and we'll go deeply into understanding what we mean by living systems, the patterns of living systems, and we use what we can observe in living systems to inform a set of patterns that we can recognize. And from those patterns, we create a set of design principles, not a set of best practices, to facilitate flexible frameworks to design, manage, and monitor your organization. And this ultimately we see as regenerating the systems that your organization is. Your organization is a living system, as well as the living systems that your organization affects and depends on. And the result of this is with a machine design, because it's constantly degenerating, it requires more and more external energy, external inputs to maintain that system. Industrial agriculture is the best example of this. We can push incredible yields, short-term yields, but it's dependent on more and more external inputs of fertilizer, of energy, of pesticides. And ultimately, then, we're constantly dependent on more and more external inputs. Starting with a living systems design, ultimately, we see requires less external energy, because we see a living system, or one of the key components of a living system is that it can regenerate, it can self-maintain. And so how do we think about your business as a living system that can self-maintain and ultimately be creating its own energy? And we know this means a shift in perspectives, in operations, in tools, in approaches, in mindsets. And this is really what the incubator is focused on. And will be at the foundation of the incubator is understanding a set of living systems patterns and creating some design principles for your context that's unique to you. This slide here just shows 6 patterns we recognize. They're not the patterns. We can recognize more patterns. We can recognize less patterns of living systems, and a generic or a general idea of the approach for design principles that we would apply to your organization. So we see that in all living systems, is the pattern of holism, that we can really only understand life and regeneration as an emergent phenomenon, understanding the whole system. We can't reduce it to its parts. And so we will work with you to say, what does that mean for your organization? How do we holistically view your organization and create a set of design and operation principles that are really creating conditions for emergent outcomes to arise. Closely related to that, we know that the health and vitality of living systems and resilience depends on all the interdependent relationships in a living system. And so we work with you to say, how does this express itself in your organization? How do we really manage for interdependence? We also recognize uniqueness. We touched on this with the idea of best practices, that each system is unique, each member of a system is unique, and so how do we manage our organizations to really take advantage or uplift that uniqueness? The next pattern we recognize is that all living systems evolve, and this is evolution. We have recognized to be not just a response to change, but actually living systems proactively affect their environment. So there's a dynamic balance between a system and its environment to maintain this ongoing dynamic balance. And so we work with you to think about your organization in that way. How are you maintaining a dynamic and proactive balance with the systems your organizations depend on? We know that living systems are not built centrally, they're not built hierarchically, they're inherently nodal, that there are processes of regeneration are decentralized and there's distributed flows of energy and resources. And so we work with you to think about how does that express itself in your context, in your organization. And the last pattern that we work a lot with is the recognition of developmental, that this is developmental not just of a few in the system, but all in the system. So just wanted to give you a little bit of a preview of some of the foundational ideas and foundations and approaches that is really making up our With Life approach, and then will be at the heart of the With Life Incubator. So just to give a bit of an overview of what the incubator is, it'll occur over 12 months. We're creating two tracks. One is for startups, and the other is for organizations looking to shift their operations or shift towards regeneration in some way. These won't be completely separate tracks. Actually, you'll spend a lot of time together, but there'll be some unique aspects for a startup and some unique aspects for established organizations. The key elements of the incubator will be mentorship from all of our team members. You'll have access to all of our team members and will soon introduce themselves. And we'll be creating small peer-to-peer design studios where we'll be going into very specific aspects of your organization and really designing with you with this living systems approach. And then throughout the incubator, we'll also be building capacity through the online courses and workshops of both In Rhythm and the Capital Institute. And so what kind of the year looks like then is we'll begin with a very high level holistic view or a sketch of your business using our regenerative design framework. And then through a combination of the mentorship and design studios, we'll be working with you individually, your team individually, to build out everything you need from this living system approach, such as specific business models and revenue models, operational structures, helping you with entity choice and legal structures, thinking about human resources and monitoring, preparing you for fundraising and access to regenerative capital, and ultimately all doing this in a way of helping you think about how are we creating conditions for regenerative capacity and emergent potential of your organization. And then along the way, throughout the year, the courses are really building your team's capacity to design, manage, and grow your business from this living systems approach. And so here are some of the courses that you'll be participating in. So that we have a foundations of regenerative organizations. We'll go into a lot more detail about what we've just quickly touched on today. We'll early on in the start of the year, you'll all be doing regenerative design lab, which is really helping you use our framework to design out your venture. We have a deep regenerative leadership program. This is really focused on how to build capacity as you as a leader, as well as others in your team to be a leader of this regenerative program. And then in addition, we'll be focused on the systems that your venture sits within, most specifically working with John and the Capital Institute, going through the Capital Institute's Introduction to Regenerative Economics course, as well as Finance for a Regenerative Economy. So that's a brief overview. We'll have time for some questions and answers, but I want to give a chance for the team to introduce themselves. So I'll pass it back to you, Alex.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so now this portion of our session together today, we're going to have the opportunity to meet the mentors who you'll be working with. And we want you to think of the mentors as an extension of your team for the 12-month program. And we're going to be working with you directly, like Jeff mentioned, bringing you resources, tools, one-to-one support in a peer-to-peer environment in order to really nurture your startup or reimagine your existing organization. So yeah, we wanted to give you the chance to just get to know each of us briefly, but you'll be spending a lot of time with us in the program. So to start, I'm going to call on Trey. Why don't you kick us off?
Welcome, everyone, and just appreciative of you taking the time out of your day to bring your curiosity and interest to this. My background is really focused on creating and building organizations and then transitioning them. I've had the opportunity to do that across multiple different industries and cultures, and have been mostly at that senior level in those kinds of engagements, from Fortune 1000 companies where we've been talking about design all the way to startups. So feel very excited about taking this lens and bringing it forward. The one thing I would say, some of you I know are coming from some of the Capital Institute's courses, and one thing that, as Jeff was sharing some of the associated patterns, some of you may be familiar with the 8 principles that came from the Capital Institute, and just want to say specifically that those principles and patterns work really nicely with one another. And just as a way to just reinforce that for those who are a part of that process, these are also things that you will be familiar with and integrate in this process of really trying to understand how those all show up in an operational way, from an economy that you would learn from a Capital Institute standpoint to an organization in trying to address the principles that show up as a part of this process. So as a team member, want to be available to those who are struggling on what does it look like to transition in an organization that already exists around processes and systems, and all the way to new organizations that are creating all of this from scratch. So excited about being a resource and bring a wealth of both skills and knowledge and in organizations looking and working through this transition now. So excited about to do that with a couple of different cohorts. Thank you.
Thanks, Trey. Tanya.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tanya. I am with the In Rhythm team. I'm really excited about this. It's so cool to see so many people on this call that are interested in the incubator. My background is kind of varied. I started in the restaurant industry, doing some managing and being a pastry chef. I went to law school. So prior to coming to In Rhythm, I was practicing corporate law for 5 years. So that legal kind of framework and mixing that or combining it with regeneration is really kind of my sweet spot on the team. I'm excited about the incubator program because I think that this is a really important step for us to make a bigger impact and to reach more people. And I'm really energized seeing so many people on this call. I'd say like the uniqueness I bring is relationships are really important to me. I like to build deep and meaningful relationships with people that I work with. And I think this program is going to be a really great opportunity for that. So I bring my legal expertise, but also I'm a deeply relational person, and that's very important to me in the process as well. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thanks, Tanya. How about we hear from John?
Sure. Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. It's great to see a bunch of familiar faces. I even noticed I've got 2 neighbors with us here from Stonington on the call, so their faces aren't showing, but I see you out there. So nice to be with you. You know, I'm really excited about this. The economics course that we're now in the 4th cohort for, and many of you are familiar with, has been really the most gratifying piece of work I've ever done in my life. But the crying need is for, okay, now what next? How do we operationalize this? And that's the point of this incubator. So I'm delighted that we've got In Rhythm, who has way more operationalizing expertise than I do, and patience for it than I do. It's nitty-gritty work, and the incubator is the idea that you know, one-on-one consulting is good in certain situations, but the learning we'll do as a cohort together will be much more valuable for all of us. And obviously, it's a way we can offer this to many more people at a much more reasonable price point than individual consulting. So I never wanted to be a consultant, and I'm just really excited about the opportunity this provides to take, you know, the conceptual work that I'm very focused on, and then figure out how to put it into practice in the real world. So I'm excited, and I'll be participating in this as one of many of the, you know, the leaders, or whatever we're calling ourselves, coaches.
Thank you, John. I'm going to call on Fran next.
Thanks, Alex. John, I think we're calling ourselves mentors, but it can be
Mentors.
leaders. Yeah, yeah.
We're all leaders. Everybody's a leader.
True. Hi, everyone. My name is Francisca Pretorius, or Fran for short. Either works. I'm an organizational consultant, organizational design consultant here at In Rhythm. I'm South African, currently based in Massachusetts. I started my career as a lawyer. I practiced corporate and commercial law in South Africa, and I served startups, small to medium enterprises, and multinationals. Then I moved to the States, and I studied an MBA in global social and sustainable enterprise. And after that, I moved a little bit into policy advice, and I was working in clean energy policy advice, a clean energy policy consulting company. Went back to law practice. Tanya and I were actually working together for a while. And there, Tanya and I focused on social enterprises and cooperatives exclusively. It was really, really interesting work. And before I joined In Rhythm, I was practicing more international law at the Commonwealth Secretariat in London. I've also been teaching law and business throughout my career in South Africa, in Kenya, in the UK, and the USA. With this incubator program, I'm really delighted to make our regenerative framework, tools, and support available to a larger group of organizations. And I'm really excited to support each organization and facilitate and see and learn from the peer-to-peer exchanges that I believe this makes this program unique and wonderful. I think that I can bring a unique viewpoint as I've been lucky to work in many different parts of the world. So yeah, great to see you all, and thank you for joining us. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Fran. John, did you want to add your comment out loud? Or I just saw it in the chat. I thought I'd just...
Oh, yeah. I thought I sent it to you. I just wanted to add one brief thing. We don't have a formal partnership lined up yet, but I can say with confidence that one of the things I'm excited to bring to this platform is its connection to the impact investment community. And I think there'll be more news on that in the future, but I spent over a decade in that space and know all the players, particularly in the United States, but also in Europe, less in Africa and Asia. And obviously access to capital, and the right kind of capital, is a critical piece here that we're hopefully going to at least help facilitate.
Awesome. Thanks for
no
adding.
Promises. We don't have a fund, just to be clear.
You did just send the comment to me, by the way, but I'm glad that
I'm
glad that you did, because it's definitely an intention that we have as a part of this program. So I think it's great that you highlighted that. Thank you. Jeff.
Great. Hi, everyone. So actually, quickly on that note, we don't have, as John said, a formal fund yet, but we do have commitments from some regenerative capital, from Dogwood Capital and some others. So that is definitely part of the program. So my background is as an academic. I started my career as an ecologist and conservation biologist. I left academia a long time ago, wanted to get out of the ivory tower, and was lucky enough to get involved in running and managing a number of different nonprofit organizations, impact-oriented organizations focused on environmental and social issues, with particular focus on network approaches to this work, and moved content-wise everything from regenerative agriculture, environmental education, to working on the built environment and anti-gentrification, anti-displacement work, and with a specific focus on working with race and equity. So I'm super excited by this incubator. It gives us a chance to bring the work of our team that we've been doing very intensely with single organizations and bring it to a much larger group of organizations working in this way. And that's our hope, as well as create peer-to-peer relationships and peer-to-peer learning with all of you who are in the incubator, to learn from each other and for us to learn from you. And I'll pass it back to Alex.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to introduce, before I introduce myself, one of our team members and mentors, Ryan, is not able to be here today. So I just thought I'd give a shout out to him and introduce him briefly. Ryan's an organizational design consultant here at InRhythm, and he leads several of our outsourced operations clients. His background is in corporate communications. He spent a number of years leading comms at a large international telecommunications company, and he's also led teams in faith-based contexts. He is really excited to bring his unique genius for designing and operationalizing operational structures, particularly for communications. He's the guy that loves facilitating hard conversations, conflict resolution, and he's excited to bring all of that to the incubator program. I've said on our last live preview, he's the guy that I'll go to if I need help just kind of making sense of something, getting to the root of an issue and making a path forward. So that's a little bit about Ryan. He'll be available as one of the mentors in the program. And then a little bit about myself. I'm originally Canadian, but based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I have about a decade of project management and organizational management experience across a bunch of different industries, mainly agriculture, internet governance, but also finance, health and wellness, and food and beverage in both the nonprofit and startup spaces. And I've been with the InRhythm team for about 5 years, worked across the whole company. And yeah, what I'm really excited about in terms of this program is, I feel like a lot of our team has already said it, but our ability to bring the work that we do one-to-one with our consulting and operational clients to a much wider audience, and working across all of the functional aspects of an organization. I feel like a lot of the times this regenerative approach tends to get pigeonholed to the impact that we have on the land or in the marketplace, but really this is about how you're working on a day-to-day basis, how you're doing finance, how you're doing human resources, how you're doing your meetings. Like all of those things really make a difference to how we're operationalizing a regenerative approach. And that's what we're going to go through with you in this program, every aspect of your organization. So that's really fun for me. I love being able to work on those things with organizations, and yeah, I really love bringing ideas to life and making things happen. So I hope that I can bring that to you through this program. Awesome. Well, I think we've done the introductions for all of our mentors. And so for the rest of today, we want to shift into the opportunity to give you all the chance to ask any questions you might have. So we would love to ask you to raise your hand if you have a question. And when you do, if you could just say your name, who you're representing, why you're interested in the incubator program, and then your question, of course. We would love to give you all the chance to get to know who's in the room, and for us to get to know you as a part of the process, as well as answer any questions you might have. So yeah, just want to open it up. feel free to raise your hand, or you're welcome to drop a question in the chat as well. Yeah. Any questions out there? Or comments? We have one, Alan. So just a reminder, Alan, name, where you're calling in from, organization, what brought you here, and then your question.
Yeah, well, that's a lot to do.
I know.
So yeah, I'm Alan Adler. I'm a managing director of a consultancy that specializes in ecosystem development for technology companies, and I'm calling from Seattle. And I'm really excited about what you guys are doing. I think you're doing some wonderful work, and I'm in John's regenerative economics class and really enjoying what John's put together. So my question basically is, since I specialize in ecosystem design, business ecosystem design, I'm really fascinated with bringing what we've done for many years of just helping technology companies make a lot of money building business ecosystems, which is losing some of its steam for me, because I'm making a lot of money for billionaire technology companies is not so ringing my bell these days. But what we've learned a lot about is the underlying dynamics of ecosystems, which are collections of companies that essentially work together to achieve more than what they could do alone. And one of the things that technology companies have done is bring these platform business models to the table, and they're extremely, extremely powerful. They're also easy to lead to corruption and all kinds of nasty outcomes. Just look at Meta and a handful of other companies, and you go, yuck, let's not do that. But the power is really amazing. And so I guess my question is twofold. Number one is, do you guys have any experience with business ecosystem design as it relates to applying the principles you have to that? And me personally, because I want to bring that capability back to the company rather than company up its ecosystem down, or at least company and ecosystem out to other companies. How does that stuff fit in, and is this relevant to you guys? And I don't want to take this too far out, because maybe this is a conversation to bring offline, but I wanted to share, that, and just see how you guys relate to that question. What's the importance of ecosystems in relationship to this business design? Because it's what I've heard so far is very intra-company design, and business ecosystem inter-company, at least at some level.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Alan. I would ask Jeff to respond to that, please.
Yeah, great question, Alan. Let's definitely I'll answer it briefly, but also would love to follow up and have a deeper conversation with you and your experience and anyone else interested. Actually, the incubator is part of the With Life initiative, which we're describing as a landscape of opportunities and services. And so to build on the ecosystem analogy, my background actually was as a landscape ecologist, and as an emerging field, it was the recognition that we needed to manage the interrelationships between ecosystems. That in a land-based context, conserving a forest separate from a lake, separate from the field, that's the matrix in between the forest and the lake, was creating siloed and bad decision making. And so landscape ecology emerged as, how do we think about the flow of resources and information and nutrients and species between ecosystems, and what's needed in that overall kind of next level. And so actually With Life is, as a concept, we're experimenting with each of the ecosystems, or each of your businesses that might be in an ecosystem, or you might be creating an ecosystem. The role of With Life is to think about how to build infrastructure and connections between those different ecosystems. And so we'll be getting into some of this ideas of managing and monitoring in this nested systems context. What is intra-company? What's intercompany? What is kind of the system, the larger system as a whole? As well as other thing that we're really excited about this incubator is we're not seeing this as a 12-month program and then you go off and disappear and we no longer are in contact with you. We want to invite all of you into this landscape model and think about, how do we build this mutually beneficial set of infrastructure that will go between ecosystems. I don't know, Trey, you want to add anything to that, or John?
Yeah, I just want to jump in. I mean, hi, Alan. Yet again, it's a great question. And interestingly, I was literally in a conversation with Bettina von Stam, who's on this call right before this call, about the idea of her bringing her pre-existing ecosystem of businesses into the incubator. So your question is spot on, very, very ripe and rich. And you know, I certainly agree with everything Jeff said. I would just emphasize that one of the ahas that I received from literally from leading our finance course was how silly it is that we build companies as isolated little trees in the desert, as opposed to building ecosystems. And so that will absolutely be part of this, but one still needs to deal with the whole that is a company as a self-contained unit, which is then part of a bigger ecosystem. So it's a great challenge, and it'll be very much part of this process. And you know,
Great.
I'm sure we could learn a lot from your experience as well. So,
Yeah, I just add one thing that's really interesting is that the whole context of partnering. So as a ecosystem specialist, partnering is the left hand of ecosystems, the right hand, and partnering is the left hand. Is the whole aspect of partners. I've been in the partnering business for like 3 decades. It's about the whole process of developing partnering strategies that actually could lead to something like you guys have a partnership.
right.
But the mechanics and the orchestration of partnerships is a science, as are ecosystem designs. And the other thing that's really interesting is that the emergence of all these technologies that we work with that are actually ecosystematic technologies, like actually technology platforms that like Otto Sharma talks about in his work, that are actually bringing together the intercompany at a platform level, not just the intercompany at a system of record. So the system of engagement across the ecosystem is actually technologically doable now with the technology that are out there. So it's really a whole emerging field of actual systems of record, systems of engagement that can actually then bring a regenerative flavor to the intercompany connection. So if there's somebody at Rhythm that wants to talk more deeply, maybe Jeff, I'd love to go. Let's deep dive on that, because it's so fascinating, the inter and intra company. And that's the fact that you guys are doing intercompany, and this is really great, because to your point, John, unless you do that, you're kind of like this little tree. No system in the natural world operates as an intra anything.
Yeah.
There is no intra anything in the natural order. It's all
Right.
inter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Great discussion, and definitely feeling like there needs to be another discussion about this. So anybody interested, please connect with Alan and Jeff, who are leading the charge on this. So we have a couple of questions in the chat, and then we also have Jennifer's hand. There's a couple in the chat that are related to one another, so I'm going to call those out, and then Jennifer will come over to you, okay? So we have 2 questions on startups that I'd love for you to answer, Trey. 1, are there any specific criteria for startups to apply? And then 2, do you have any case studies to share having gone through this process successfully? Most curious, mostly from the startup perspective.
Great. Thank you for the questions. The only criteria on the specifics for a startup is really that there is a idea that is in place already as a way that you're going to focus on building a business around. If that is still early stage, meaning you're still playing with different ideas and you're not sure what you want to start, the incubator is probably too fundamentally focused on the design of the idea that's already in place. And we actually would encourage you to go take our design lab, which is really to play with ideas and potentially use that as a shorter way to get more clear. And then we're also wanting you to do this. It's not that a single entrepreneur couldn't do it, but we're assuming that you've got a couple of people you're nurturing this with. And that may or may not be true. We're still okay with single entrepreneurs, but we know that if there are multiple people holding this as a part of that process, it really lands versus just a single individual. So we are encouraging teams to go through this versus just single individuals, even though we know we will have some single individuals in this process. And then in reference to what does success look like, or in terms of what this may look like over a year, part of what we're wanting people to understand and going through this process is the reality that a naturally functioning ecosystem is something that creates conditions that allow for everyone to thrive, and it can be abundant in outcomes. And right now we are so designed to extract from, say, the internal team or from our ecosystem of customers to create our outcomes. We're creating a very different design and approach from that standpoint. And so for us, our intention is for that, very similar to the way Alan described it, it really isn't an in and out. It is an ecosystem of where we all have different roles. And as a part of that, us recognizing, building capacity around that and being able to demonstrate that in practice. So as a existing organization, that's the way we would want it to see, and that may be in a pilot or a process. In a startup, we're beginning to design that way. So at the end of a startup, we would hope that that functional design is in place and that you're able to communicate that and actually begin to implement that as a part of your strategy moving forward. And then in reference to case studies, we've got lots and lots of examples of how we've done this with different startups and organizations, but we don't have any formal case studies in play. And but we'd be happy to share some of those experiences from a lot of small and startup organizations that are applying this. Right now, we've taken, just through our design process, over 1,000 different organizations and individuals through this that are using it in nonprofit settings and for-profit settings to be able to design their work. And then in terms of larger organizations, shifting or doing pilots as a part of that process, from manufacturing, industrialized environments where you've got a lot of hourly workers in a production environment, all the way to kind of white collar professional design where we're shifting that around, say, architectural firms or business services. So that would be the example of all kinds of those different organizations that are doing and implementing this process.
May I add something quick to that, Alex? I think for the startup context, one pattern that we see in our approach to working with startups that might be different from a traditional approach is startups tend to focus on what are we going to create, how are we going to do it, what's our business, what's our service, and to use a gardening or farming analogy, we would say this is like saying, oh, I want to plant corn, without knowing anything about your soil, your water, your rainfall, the conditions. And you could do a great analysis of, is there a market for corn? You could do a great analysis of people like corn, but you haven't done analysis of the health of your system and whether corn is the right choice. And so our approach really says, how are we looking at the inherent foundational health, the intrinsic health of our system, and then creating products and services and a business around that, and how do we maintain that health and capacity?
Awesome. I hope that answers the question. We have another question. I love this one from Chad. Where do you hope organizations will be after a year? In other words, what does success look like? Maybe let's popcorn to a couple different team members, because I think we all have, we're all inspired by different things. Maybe starting with you, Jeff. Where do you hope organizations participating in this will be after a year?
I think for the startups, our intention really is for you to have launched and funded and be operating your business that you are coming into. So it's really designed to be a end-to-end, everything from ideation to launch. For the organizations, we are imagining it's going to be very unique for each organization. It may be a whole organization shift, or it might be sort of a beacon project or one aspect of a larger business that was making its shift towards regeneration. And so that's why we're creating the two different tracks. The startup is very clear, kind of what the endpoint is. The organizations, we're going to be doing more work with you up front to say, what are your goals? What is the shift you're wanting to make? And what's the best sort of expression of that within your business?
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Anyone else from the team wants to add?
Yeah, I'll add a point just to be provocative. we're going to need to practice letting go of the outcome and work on the process. And the whole idea of the regenerative paradigm is that we can't set goals and meet our deliverables. We need to work with the complexity. So obviously I could answer the question more rationally, but I'd also like to answer it with a provocation.
I love that. Fran?
Maybe just, yeah, just to add to that, I fully agree with John. I think if we can all get comfortable with the discomfort of not knowing the outcomes, but also have clarity on what a regenerative framework looks like in a startup context versus in a more experienced organization. So there will be an aspect of clarity on what regeneration looks like in your organization and where you want to be, but also comfort with the fact that there can be abundant outcomes that we don't even know about.
Thank you, Fran. Tanya?
Yeah, and just like one other thing, I think in our work, we focus a lot on creating conditions for health, and that the outcomes then are abundance. And we don't design for the outcomes. We create conditions for health and emergence in the business. So I think that aligns really well with what John stated, and just a little bit more concrete of how we do that, why we don't focus on outcomes, what we focus on instead.
Thank you, Tanya. Awesome. We have another question in another direction from Cyrus. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Cyrus. From Nairobi, Kenya. I'm setting a startup that will provide a consultancy around sustainability, and the goal is to shift to regeneration. Can one apply as a solo founder? The incubator would be a good fit for organizations, businesses, communities, governments in the developing South. And what would a regenerative economy look like in the global South? Trey, would you like to take that one? And then John, I saw you also respond in the chat. So maybe Trey and then John, if you each want to speak to that question from Cyrus. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Cyrus. As I shared before, we encourage solo founders to apply, but we're also looking for teams, and so that is a part of the design. So we just encourage, this to be more than just a single individual's intention, even though we know that may be something that emerges over time. And then I would say that your intention in Kenya around some kind of consultancy around sustainability and shifting to this regeneration, I think is an emerging field and substantially in Africa. And we've got an office in South Africa where we're really trying to support that kind of work. So there is some potential reasons to just have some deeper conversations around that. And that we do think that the environment in Africa is different across different aspects of the continent, and that creating conditions there are different than it would be in Europe or in the US. And we're very focused on how can we do that. And actually, I know we have some of our team members here that are based in South Africa right now, where some of those intentions are active and an ongoing conversation. So we would love to support emerging businesses on the continent.
Thanks, Trey. John, did you want to speak to your comment in the chat around a regenerative economy in the region, or?
No, I wrote what I thought. I think it's fine.
Okay. Jeff?
I was just going to say, Fran has spent some time in Kenya. I don't know if you wanted to respond as well.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, Cyrus. I used to live in Nairobi. I was teaching at Strathmore University, so I know the region and your city pretty well. I think as John mentioned, and as Trey also said, regeneration looks a little bit different in Africa. And to be honest, I think Africa is way more open and ripe for a regenerative approach. As John mentioned in his comment, it's pretty entrenched, the mechanistic thinking that we have in the global north. The global south is more, it's more connected to land and living systems. And the concept of Ubuntu, I feel like, is pretty prevalent across Africa, and that is very much aligns with our work. So I actually think that the regenerative approach would be an easier sell in Africa than it is here. I think what's interesting in Africa is that we still need a lot of funds there, and we fundraise a lot for organizations in Africa. And in fundraising, we need to translate our inherent understanding of living systems and how we do business to this Western concept and capitalistic and entrenched mechanistic approach. So I do feel that that is definitely an area ripe for disruption and an exciting area to innovate in. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Fran. John.
I just might add to that, the kind of non-US centric nature of this work. I in the last 2 years, in this order, Colombia and Chile have embraced the regenerative economy paradigm, including at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is, the big business, global business, mainstream sustainability effort. And so I'm experiencing this landing in the US in things like agriculture and the built environment, but outside the US, much more as a whole economy concept. So I feel very strongly that the US is going to learn from other regions rather than the other way around on this one.
Awesome. I noticed, so Jennifer had her hand up earlier, but we did not get to her. So Jennifer, I'd like to invite you up onto the stage.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Jen Rothman. I'm the director of a small nonprofit in Southeastern Connecticut, one of John's neighbors. Hi, John. It's called the Yellow Farmhouse Education Center. Our mission is to connect people to each other and to where their food comes from through food and farm-based education. And our sort of 2 big areas of focus are working with teachers, high school culinary teachers, to shift the curriculum to kind of change the way we teach cooking and to teenagers who are about to embark on independent decision-making about their food choices. And then the other is a international conference that we run. It's called KojiCon, and it's about koji-based fermentation or mold-based fermentation, and sort of exploring about what the future of fermentation is to solve some of the larger issues in our food system. And this may have been answered. I apologize, I was a little bit late joining, but my question is about whether this incubator would be appropriate for a nonprofit, and is it a good fit for, we're about 5 years old, so we're a pretty solid foundation, but I'm now this year thinking about the strategic thinking I need to do in the next year to scale up and build our organization.
Awesome. Great question, Jennifer. I'll throw that one over to Jeff.
Yeah, Jennifer, absolutely. The incubator is relevant for nonprofit, for-profit, government. It really, the process we take you through is very, very relevant. And then myself in particular, most of my background is in nonprofit development and nonprofit management, and so could offer a lot of insight personally into building, sustainable fundraising and sustainable revenue models in a nonprofit context.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. And we've got a question from Gary in the chat that I'll just read out loud. Trey, I think maybe you'll take this one. Gary asks, in the nitty-gritty of operations, the artificial construct called the fiscal year happens to be the same as the calendar year in our organization. Given the November cohort start, will this reality be addressed in any way, i.e. redesigning in the midst of fiscal realities?
It's actually, I think, Gary, I think that's true with most of these different organizations. There will be all kinds of different seasonalities that may exist around their business and products and programs, in addition to fiscal design. And so we are and know we need to be flexible, especially in existing organizations. That gets really clear up front and what the rhythm needs to be for that organization. And then in startups, just to address something that was brought up at our last preview, there may be just different priorities that show up earlier for some startups and later for others. So we know we need to be flexible as a part of this process. Though we have a design in mind, we know that we may need to spend more time on certain aspects of that design for certain organizations based on other external pressures. So we are going to be open, but at the same time, we're asking the organization to also embrace this larger design, because it will help you design something more fundamental across the entire organization as you move forward. So we get the both and in this process. So we're looking to be flexible, but also at the same time still hold that larger cohort process to be able to allow peers and other resources to be a benefit to you when and when it's necessary, when it's meaningful.
Awesome. Thank you, Trey. And I think we have time for one more question. We have Alexandra's question in the chat. Can you please reshare the requirements for members that arrive later? Do you mean the application requirements?
Yeah, no, the application, meaning timelines. Like, for example, it's a once a month commitment. So my members wanted to know exactly what the commitment is. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I understand. So the time commitment.
Correct.
Yeah, so we estimate, I'll take that one. So we have estimated that it'll be anywhere, so I'll start with, there's no such thing as a typical week in the incubator program. Every week's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a mix of meetings with your mentors, working in a peer-to-peer environment, get conversations with inspirational thought leaders. You might be going through online courses and workshops. But throughout the course of the year, we estimate a time commitment of anywhere between 1 to 5 hours a week, depending on what you're going through at the time. And so, as Trey said, it's really going to be unique to your context. We're holding the whole of a design that we're going to be walking everybody through together in a one big cohort, but also, your organization is going to be at a unique, you're going to have a unique journey based on your unique needs. Team, Jeff, anybody else want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I will add, we're really designing it to both what Trey and Alex have said, is to be really meaningful to you and basically the work that you will be doing anyways, and we're assisting. So we really hope that it's not sort of, I have a requirement like here, but then I have the work that I need to do over here. The point of the incubator is we're really your team to help you assist in the work you are doing, to bring your startup to life or bring your project in your organization to life. So just, I don't understand the question. Of course, you're trying to see like how much, what's the kind of scope of it. But in terms of intention, we're really hoping, how do we be a assistance to you in the work that you're going to be doing anyways, whether you were part of this or not part of this.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. It does help, because a lot of people in the centralized working environments are working on 4 or 5, sometimes 6 projects or even more. So it's hard to really kind of, manage your times. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks that's a great question, Alexandra. Thank you. Well, I just want to recognize that we are at time and want to be respectful of all of your time. Speaking of time, we will be sharing the recording of this presentation after the call, and we would love to invite you to join us. This is a unique opportunity. We're looking to work with a small group of organizations to bring your regenerative approach to life. So I've dropped a link in the chat to our webpage where you can find the program guide with a lot more information about the program. You can find a link to the application form. Applications are due Sunday night. Please, you're welcome to email us to schedule a one-on-one with one of our mentors. If you have any questions, if you're not sure if it's a good fit for you, please get in touch. I'm going to drop our email in the chat. All of this will be in our follow-up email. So just thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We really hope you'll participate in the program. We're really excited about it, as you can see, and we hope that it'll be impactful for all those who end up joining. So yeah, thanks again. Appreciate you taking the time, and we hope to see your applications.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
all.
everyone. And Brooke, we'd be happy to share the slides. So I just saw your last chat. So